everyone, welcome back to the Commodore room. Hope everyone is doing well today. What we have here is a item I found on the internet. I really enjoy finding things that are broken and seeing if I can fix them. And so what we have here is a Commodore SX-64. If you've been watching the channel, you know that I've got a few of these in the corner that need some work. And to be honest, the price on this one was so good I couldn't pass it up. I paid about $100 for it. And I thought, well, it might be kind of fun to play with. It doesn't do anything when you turn it on. At least that's what the seller said. And so for $100, I figured I'd go ahead and pick it up and see what we can do with it. I've never actually worked on a 64, an SX-64 before. I mean, I'm certainly familiar with the architecture, but I've not worked on one quite like this. So this ought to be kind of fun. We'll get this thing working one way or another. And then I've got some ideas on some future modifications, which I think would be kind of neat to do to a machine like this. So we'll go ahead and open this guy up, take a look, experiment around, see if we can figure out what's wrong with it, and at least get it back up and operational in this video. And then in the next couple of videos that I've got planned, we'll have some fun with it. So here it is. We've got it all set up. Everything looks good. And this is going to be the first power on. I have not turned this on in any way, so let's see what happens. Okay, we saw the disk drive come on and do its self-test and shut off, so that's positive. Not seeing a whole lot here. Oh, maybe it's starting to power up. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to test out here is I'm going to type a command that should access the disk drive, and let's just see if we get anything at all. Didn't get anything, so not sure what that means. It could be the video is out, could be something worse or better. So I'm going to look and see if I can hook this up to an external monitor. Again, I've never worked on one of these before. I've played with a few of them, and I have several, but I've never actually worked on one. So I'm going to take a look and see if we can hook this up to an external monitor, and that might be something to try, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we've got it hooked up to the monitor. Let's see what happens. Okay, so that's not right. I'm going to go ahead and adjust some of the controls for the color and the contrast, which probably only apply to the screen here, shouldn't apply to that screen. But just for fun, we're going to make some adjustments here just to see what we get. I did some adjustments. Nothing changed. So on the screen here you may see a few artifacts from the camera, but basically we're not seeing anything. We're not seeing anything on the external monitor. So maybe we'll put in a dead test cartridge and just see what happens with that. And I still have the external monitor hooked up. Not seeing anything at all on the external monitor now. And it does sound like the tube is charging. I can kind of hear that high-pitched whine. I also don't know if this cartridge port even works, so got a lot of unknowns going on here. So I'm going to put in Jupiter Lander. I've had pretty good luck testing dead machines with this and getting some interesting results, so we'll just pop it in and see what happens. Okay, on the external monitor, so with Jupiter Lander, we're getting a blue screen. That's a bit different. So let me go ahead and turn it off. Pop the cartridge out. We get a red screen. Or pink, maybe. Alright, well I guess it is time to take things apart. While I'm taking this portable computer apart, it's important to remember that this has a CRT inside of it. A CRT, or cathode ray tube, has a tremendous amount of voltage in it, and it's like a very large capacitor and can keep that voltage or that charge built up over quite a while. I'm not 100% sure how this one is designed and made, but suffice to say it's a bit dangerous, so we're going to need to discharge this tube before I go poking around in here too much. There are a lot of varying opinions on the best and safest way to discharge a CRT, and what I'm showing you is the way that I choose to do it. I think the important part is, if you're not very comfortable and very sure what you're doing, you really should not attempt or play around with these. The voltages can literally last for days on end and can be deadly. The inside of the SX-64 is a bit different than a standard 64. You've got the CPU card, which houses the CPU, the VIC chip, and the SID chip, among other things. You've got an I/O card, which essentially has the CIA chips. And then finally, you've got a disk controller in the back there that's pretty long, that basically is the main board for the 1541 disk drive that's built in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to disassemble this and try to pull out the CPU card as well as the I/O card, just to take a look and see if I can see anything visually that looks like it might be wrong. A couple things on the inside of this. There's a lot of metal brackets and of course a lot of circuit boards, and those two don't always mix, so you got to be very careful that you keep things away from metal that don't need to be against metal. You'll notice there are some little plastic black rivets almost that are holding or anchoring the cards into those little metal brackets. You can see right here as I'm pulling this one out. You got to be careful not to lose those because they're pretty small, and those are really what keeps the boards in the proper position. So let's go ahead and pull these boards out and then take a look and see if we see anything that looks suspicious. Okay, here we have the CPU board, and it's got all the things you would expect: the ROMs, the PLA, the SID, and even the VIC chip with a pretty nice heatsink on it, so that's good. Looking at the back, it does appear that there's been some repair work done, specifically on the PLA. You can see on the front the PLA is socketed, but if you look here on the back, you can see the remnants of a repair job. So I'll move in a little bit closer so you can see here. So I'm going to guess the PLA was replaced with a socket and then some PLA put back into the socket. So since there's been repair work done here before, I'm going to start by replacing the PLA. It's already socketed, so we'll go ahead and put in a different PLA and see if we don't get any better results. Since the PLA is a common failure point in a lot of Commodore 64s, I've had this habit of every time I find a replacement, I get it and try it and see how it works. So I've got a PLA here that I found on eBay at some point, and I went ahead and bought a couple of them just to see how they work. So we're going to grab this one, pop it in, and see what happens. Well. Look at that. All right. Wouldn't that be something if I got this for $100 and all it had was a bad PLA? That's hilarious. Look at that. Nice. You might have a little bit of an artifact on the camera here, so I'm going to go ahead and hook up the external monitor, but it's looking really nice and very sharp. And there it is. Sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and hook the keyboard up and we'll play around with it a little bit. Okay, so one thing I noticed using this is the keyboard doesn't work really good. I'm pushing lots of keys here. You can see that very few of them are showing up. If I really push on them, I can get some of them to show up. So playing around here, I can get all the keys to come on the screen. I can get all the keys to work, but certainly not easily. So it's not a case of a bad CIA chip. If that was the case, the keys probably just wouldn't work at all, and I've seen that lots of times. So there's definitely something not happy with this keyboard. So I haven't been able to test the disk drive out yet because it's been so hard to get the keys to work. So what I'm going to do is take this keyboard apart and see what we can get going there. The good news is the computer does seem to work, and I did play some games on it using the joystick, so that's great. But obviously it's got some other issues. So let's tear this keyboard apart. So looking a little closer at the keyboard, you can see that one of the clips is broken off here. And if you can hear that, I think that's the clip. So we'll go ahead and take this apart using the little tabs and poke the screwdriver in there and see what we were dealing with. As I take apart this keyboard, I have to be careful not to break off any more of the plastic tabs. I've never worked on a keyboard from an SX-64, so this is a bit new to me. And what we're going to find in here, once I remove all of the keys, is a little membrane that is underneath the key plungers. The membrane gets pushed up against the circuit board, and that's what makes the connection. And as I've done a little bit of research on these, the keyboards are notorious for failure. So I did find a place on the internet that sells membranes, and I went ahead and ordered one. So I'm just going to replace this membrane and get the machine back up and running. I'm going to keep the old membrane and do some experimenting with it to see if I can restore it. But I've got a lot of projects backed up, and I don't want this video to be any longer than it already is. So I'm going to just replace the membrane with a new membrane so we can get it back up and running, and we'll save the faulty one for future experimentation. While I've got this apart, I'm going to go ahead and retrobrite the keys. There were some that were a little yellowed and didn't quite look the same color and weren't as consistent as some of the other keys on the keyboard. So I'm going to use the Ziploc bag, the hydrogen peroxide cream. I've had real good luck with this on keys. Not as much luck with the cream on cases as we saw with one of the previous videos, but with the keys I really have had really good luck with it. So what I'm going to do is put this under the light. I'm going to come back and massage the cream around the keys, rotate the keys under the light. This will take about 2, maybe 3 hours, and I should get a fairly consistent result when I'm finished. So I've got our new membrane here, and I'm going to go ahead and get this keyboard put back together. This is not a piece of equipment that was made back in the 80s that has just been dug up out of a warehouse someplace. This is actually a modern implementation of that design, so it should work a lot better. I went ahead and tested it just briefly, and everything seems to work fine. So once I get the keyboard put all back together, we'll be able to type on it and actually be able to use it and test the disk drive and go ahead and finish doing some diagnostics on this thing and make sure it works okay. And here you can see we have the keys all back on the keyboard. Everything looks very consistent. The color is good with all the keys. RetroBrite did a really great job. The last step with this keyboard is to get it back into its case. Okay, here we got our keyboard, and I've got the top cover glued. And you can see, now maybe you can see, we've got the tab put back. And so I'm not going to snap it in and put a lot of pressure on it since it's glued with plastic cement. So what I'm going to do is try to do that first, so that there's not as much pressure on it. So I'm going to go this way and snap in from the back. And there we go. So now it's held in there, doesn't rattle, and it looks pretty nice. So there we go. So now that we've got a working keyboard, it probably makes sense to run the diagnostic cartridge against this machine and see what we find. I'll be honest, when I first started running the diagnostic cartridge, I kept getting all sorts of bizarre errors and things that just didn't really make sense. Not the least of which was that the socket locations or the names of the sockets where the chips go just didn't line up. After a little bit of research on the internet, what I found was that there's a lot of problems with using the 50 or the 588-220, the kind of standard 64 diagnostic cartridge on an SX-64. I did find a good ROM that is designed specifically for the SX-64, and it's actually been updated here in the last few years. So this is a really good find. Once I started using that diagnostic cartridge, which is what you're seeing here, everything worked a lot better. Now you will see that it thinks the PLA is bad, but recall that I replaced this with a third party or aftermarket PLA, so I'm not surprised at all that it sees problems with that. But the good thing is I haven't noticed any problems as I've been playing some of the cartridge games. So let's go ahead and test out the disk drive, and then if all goes well there, let's play some games. So what I've got here is a really good disk drive test suite for the Commodore 64. And so I think I found this on eBay several years ago. I bought it and I've used it quite a bit. It does a pretty good job finding problems and whatnot. So I'm going to run this system through all the tests, and what you're going to see here is everything seems to work fine. I did clean the heads just to be sure that there wasn't anything floating around in there that shouldn't be there. But other than that, it looks pretty good. So as our celebration for getting this app back up and running, I thought I would fire up the best game ever made, Mule. As I said earlier, I've not really had an opportunity to work on one of these. And so this was as much of a learning experience as it was anything else. I'm certainly familiar with the 64, the architecture, and how to repair them. But this is a little bit different the way this one's made, and so it's kind of cool getting to see how everything was put together. I've got some ideas on some modifications that I want to make to this to kind of make it more fun. And so we'll get started on those here real soon, and you'll be seeing this SX-64 again pretty soon. Thanks for watching, and I hope you come hang out in the Commodore room again with us real soon.